like you were having fun.
No, I
just
felt the need to bang on my go-go.
I go. I go.
I don't know what that sounds like, but I felt the need to bang on my go-go.
Okay.
Anyway, what we are doing now is continuing the reading of The Busting Out of an Ordinary Man, which is Ghetto Sketches 2.
Yes, which is Ghetto Sketches 2.
I gave the history of this particular book in the last, am I here?
Yeah, you're there.
Okay,
yeah.
I gave a little bit of a background and history of how this book cover came to be in the last session, which was that the publisher decided that they would put this cover on it despite the fact that it had nothing to do with the book, because they had a leftover cover for another book that they hadn't published or whatever they did.
Right.
At that point in time, Holloway House was known to do any number of things. So
Exactly.
I managed to get out from under that by
Yes.
retrieving rights to my books from Holloway House, which had sold its assets to Kensington Press, and they came back to me and they were reissued by Universe, which is now presently reissuing the books under on the road.
Yeah, on Open Road, they sold our books to them. And we're in the process of figuring that one out. We're in the process of figuring it out.
You got that right.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to continue with this. I guess you call this chapter 2.
Mm-hmm.
And it finds us in the writing workshop.
Oh, let me mention your books can be purchased on Amazon, www.amazon.com. And your website is www.odiehawkins.com. Okay. Please.
Okay, you just mentioned where it can be purchased.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say to you this.
Yes, sir.
It could be read anywhere.
This is true.
Anywhere. All you need is a little light.
Uh-huh.
If you wear glasses to read, like I do,
Mm-hmm.
put your glasses on.
Uh-huh.
Go anywhere where there's a little light
Mm-hmm.
and start reading.
They're in paperback and mostly also in ebooks. Okay.
Lubertha's eyes wandered from face to face, smiling at one, nodding to another. There were times when she hated the club's meeting without Kwendi, the way the brothers and sisters looked at her as though she was some kind of a martyred black ghost. She listened to Nisi run up one list of financial figures and down the another, explaining in detail exactly what expenditures had been made, what this and what that was all about. Charlie Tucker stood as soon as she had finished to give out the latest on Kwendi's case, what progress had been made and how. The job had formerly been Lubertha's, but over the years it had become too rough for her to handle emotionally. To stand at meetings and announce to the world that her man was in a deep bind, that she was in limbo, and that it was likely to be that way for years. She caught Ojinkasi looking at her, a soft gleam in his eyes, and smiled pleasantly, neutrally in his direction. He always seemed to be looking at me these days, she reflected, gearing herself for the political awareness section of the meeting, her contribution. In 9 other places in the city, at staggered times, this same kind of meeting was taking place. With certain allowances for personality differences, the meeting was the same. The police oppressors called them cell meetings of subversives, conspirators, and tried to keep tabs on them whenever they could. The membership simply called itself the club and came to learn a few truths, gain some insight and awareness, hoping eventually to put it all together in such a fashion that they would affect some profound changes in their neighborhoods, the city, the state, and perhaps the country. The club had almost been killed off during the first 3 years of its existence, before it learned not to publicize its aim to give the enemy guidelines, but now it stood strong, vital, and thriving, Kwendi's spirit giving it life. Lubertha stood quickly at the conclusion of Charlie Tucker's report in tune with the policies they had established to prevent business from dragging on and on. This evening, sisters and brothers, going on with how some of the bullshit operates in this country, I would like to cover briefly 3 specific areas that are very important to all of us. I haven't really labeled each of the areas because they're all interrelated. Politics, money, and food. Politics, money, and food. She paused to study her notes for a couple of seconds, pursing her lips thoughtfully, mindful of a few things that Kwendi had laid on her in a recent letter. Give them as much hip information as they can stand, baby. Black folks have been in need of some correct information, more information, something that will act as a true agent for change. First of all, she continued, on the political side, I don't think I have to get into a whole bunch of examples to show how rotten the political structure of the country is at this point in time. Even the corrupt newspapers owned by the corrupt politicians find themselves being forced to tell the truth because everybody knows the truth these days. Well, at least those who admit that they know the truth. As you all remember in our last meeting, we discussed the reasons why the political structure started off stanky and got progressively rotten as time went on. That was back in the days of George Washington, the father of our country. She paused to allow the laughter that our sarcastic tone of voice provoked to die down. The span of time we have covered goes from then to now. She held up a newspaper clipping of one of the president's latest lies. But the prerequisite, the conditions needed for wrongdoing in government have always existed. They've been encouraged. The founding fathers made certain of that. The only changes that they've been able to make over the country is that corruption is more sophisticated, more ruthless, more corrupt now. 2 of the greatest reasons why corruption has always been a part of the American political scheme of things concerns, first of all, money, and secondly, money. We could reverse those 2 things and still wind up probably with the same meal of beans. She checked Chico Daddy and Chayo Mungu's expressions off closely to determine whether or not her message was getting through. She knew from experience that if they were understanding it all, then she was over. Chayo's puzzled frown told her that she'd have to go a little deeper in a simpler way. Let's step back in time a little bit. To when the contracts and deals were made. One of the things that the dealer made certain of when he was passing out the contracts was that the dudes with the most bread got the biggest out of whatever was being passed out. Them that's got shall get. Now, them that's not shall lose. So Billie Holiday said in her song. Despite all the rhetoric about this being a democracy and all, it didn't start off that way and it hasn't become one yet. As a matter of fact, it's looking more and more like it's not about to happen every day. Chayo's frown eased slightly. Okay. I started off about money, power, and food. If you check the situation out closely, you'll see the people who've always been in power, those few rich dudes who decide how much everything is going to cost, the ones who have always had the means to manipulate prices, and since we all have to eat, the greatest manipulations have been with food prices. Yeah, I know. We can talk about steel, lumber, and a whole bunch of other things, but they wind up being spin-offs from the basic manipulation. She paused again to watch Ojinkasi walk over and shake Sherman from a light nap. Or was he nodding? There were rumors going on about him. Now then, she continued, smiling briefly at Ojinkasi, on the basis of what we've gone over before, we know that early on in the game, the power structure of this country has practiced dollar imperialism, backed up by superior bullshit and a greater lack of principles than almost any other country in modern times, including England. Shit. Those of us who paid close attention to how and why this country has messed around in the internal affairs of other countries know that usually the reason was for the benefit of the rich and the ripping off of the poor. To use an example, a lot of people would like to believe that the American war fought against the Vietnamese people was to prevent the spread of communism from the north of Vietnam to the south. Meanwhile, the president of this country was over in big bad China, big bad red China, drinking toasts with Mao. Because the money people here, fed up with that rhetoric about a giant bamboo curtain, had told him, look, asshole, get your jive ass over there and set up some trade agreements with these people. 800 million Chinese are dying for Coca-Cola and a stick of beech nut chewing gum. And so he went, just like he was supposed to go, because big business sent him. Big business sent him. Meanwhile, back in the war, which was fought for control of the dope trade in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, Bobo spoke out a skeptical look on his serious dog face. For the dope trade, sister? For the dope trade? That what you said? That's right, brother, for the dope trade. Doesn't it stand to reason? Think it. Practically every commercial enterprise in this country is fought over or for, in one sense of the word or another. Now let's face it, heroin is big, big business. She paused briefly to stare pointedly at Chairman's dreamy expression. If any of us in this room had a kilo of heroin that we wanted to kill our people off with, all we'd have to do is get together with those who are trying to do it anyway and make a sale. 2-to-1, whoever bought it would probably cheat us in the deal and have us ripped off to seal the deal, but that's to be expected. All I'm really trying to say by way of example is that dope dealing is probably the biggest and best business in the world. You got a built-in consumer market and the profits are fantastic. Why wouldn't they fight a war over that? Call it America's secret opium war if you want to. She paused again, theatrically, to let her message sink in, feeling proud of the enlightened look she had put on Bobo's face. I think I've drawn enough parallels between money and power. It's not too hard to put together. I like to wind up with the connection of food to all of this. She felt tempted to say, Kwendi says, but erased the thought, anxious not to mummify what he was saying to her in letters. Besides, he had told her many times about the dangers of the cult thing. If you check out the price on items like bread and milk, for example, you'll see that they've usually been jacked up unmercifully after one of this country's wars. The reason being, after the power elite have made all they can make on guns and bullets, that there's not too much more to be made on other items. The one stable source for a ripoff is food. So, they add 2 or 3 pennies more to items we have to have and continue to make it up, keeping our cost of living high so that they can cover the inflated standard of living. She probed the attentive faces for a sign of disagreement as she talked, feeling a twinge of guilt at not being able to really say in words something about the concepts, the ideas that Kwendi was laying on her from his deep introspection in prison. She came to the end of her remarks with a solid bit of advice. Know where they're coming from, or else you might get fooled, and sat down, feeling vaguely dissatisfied with her presentation. For some reason, no matter what she said or how she said it, it was always a dim shadow of the kind of muscular intensity Kwendi had going. Abdul stood next to give a progress report on their alliance with 3 Chicano groups who were modeling an organization after theirs. Lubertha studied the fiercely carved lines on Abdul's face and wondered for the first time what his name had been before he changed it. The beginning of the club, the agony that made it necessary, the guidelines established, the early days of arguments about what they would or could accomplish, flashed through her consciousness as she listened to the heavy rise and fall of Brother Abdul's voice. A sudden, deep-felt sense of hopelessness overwhelmed her for a moment. She lowered her head, afraid that the feelings would show in her eyes, betray everything they were trying to accomplish. What the hell did it matter? She asked herself. If they had cleaned all the dope peddlers out of the neighborhood and had some slimy politician take credit for all of it. What did it matter that her little seminars on American politics taught young brothers and sisters more than they would ever learn in any American school about the real nature of the dominant white power source? Or that they had established sections in each one of the clubs that dealt with art, music, our story, drama, mathematics, sociology, the politics of revolution, and how to make them work. In addition to having worked on each other, sharpening their sense of brotherness and sisterness with real sacrifices for each other, like sending Rudy to school. None of it seemed to matter, she thought sadly. None of it. So long as the world they were living in was threatened to be polluted out of existence any coming month now. Not something purely black, white, yellow, brown, or any other color. Despite the fact that the white boy, with his misguided ideas about manhood was all about, was largely responsible for it. No, this was something greater than they were, a little bunch of African Americans wanting human rights. This was a planet rights thing, as she hated being forced to only deal with a thin slice of the whole thing. Niecy Miles nudged Maisha, pointed at Lubertha with her eyelashes. Maisha nodded back, aware of Lubertha's state of mind, saddened beyond words for her sister's hurt. After all, how many Kwendis were there in the world? The meeting went on. Rudy slouched down in his seat, half a mind on what might be going on at the club's meetings, half a mind on what the little dull-eyed Jewish guy with the tweed sports jacket and the expensive pipe was saying. He glanced around at his classmates, their shiny blue eyes riveted on the instructor's movements as though he were an A+ in slow motion. His attention wandered into the seat 2 hours to the right of him, right up between the milk-fed thighs of Dora Hirschberger, and then sped away, guilt bringing down the curtain. This was definitely not what the club was sending him to school for. He smiled to himself and scribbled a flurry of notes. What a hell of an idea, his own, he thought proudly, to send club members off to school, to use their talents in as many ways as possible to help the community. The idea had blossomed in him during Kwendi's 3rd trial, attended to by a jive black lawyer who had been damn near shamed into dealing with the case. Threatened might have been a different way to describe his involvement. It was at that point that he began to persuade first Kwendi and then the membership, rather than just be some damn gang, he had argued, whipping asses and taking names. Why not become doctors, lawyers, artists, professionals working for the club's causes? Well, it had to be the people's causes, because that's who we are. He frowned at the memory of some of the arguments, some of the opposition the sisters and brothers had given him. Oh, what the fuck you trying to pull, Rudy? All you want to do is take a freebie on our backs. Yeah, the obstacles had been there, but Eventually, with Kwendi backing the idea and the membership falling in line, they had managed to stick 4 brothers and sisters into school. Law, economics, Kwendi's idea. We ought to know how money makes things function up in here. Kwendi Jones, beautiful brother. Our story, political science, and they were trying to groom a brother and sister for medical school. That was going pretty slow because of the expense, but hopefully within the next few years, they would have club doctors, lawyers, economics, hip dudes from the block with more than just degrees, pieces of paper more than an education. They would have a sense of commitment to the community that sponsored them. He straightened up in his seat, suddenly conscious that he was a club member, that he had a rep to maintain. The club's membership people, they call themselves, and they worked harder because they had pride in that. Rudy wrinkled his forehead, trying to concentrate harder to scratch all other intruding thoughts out. Wonder where Felicine was going. Over. And now, class, will you please place all of your notes and books under your seats? We're going to have a little quiz. Call it 20 questions if you like. Rudy placed his books under his desk, thought of keeping his small notepad concealed under his left forearm, but decided against it. What the fuck, I can go through this shit blindfolded with minimum output and still get a B. Why cheat? He folded his hands on his desk and waited grimly for the multiple choice questionnaire to be passed out. Even with a full-time gig and 1,001 other things to worry about, school was a sop. The hardest part was making it to class on time. And that's where we are at this point.
Oh my, okay. Right into it.
I wanted to leave you in class.
Leaving in class.
I can see
you ready to take the test?
That's right.
Okay.
As someone who's taken many tests.
Oh yes, definitely. Waiting.
You know what that is like.
Yes, you don't know if it's going to be multiple questions, questions. Yeah, or do a paragraph. Anyway, but thank you very much, and that's a fantastic idea.
I'm trying to make it short and brief, but to the point.
Yeah, I like that.
And also sometimes long and short.
Okay.
And also short and long.
Short and long, okay. Okay, just before we wrap this up, why don't you reach behind and get the last book that you just finished reading? Right behind you. Right, the book behind you?
I don't have eyes in the back of my head anymore. I used to.
Turn around and look.
What's the book called?
Allow Me to Retort.
Man, listen. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Where is this?
There you go.
You see this brother here with this full-fledged hairdo. Full-fledged haircut.
Allow Me to Retort.
Eli Mistal, I think you pronounce his name. I want to say Eli, but it's Eli Mistal. He's frequently on Joy Reid's show. He's on some of the cable shows. We recently saw him on The View, and he's a legal mind. He makes. I read the book.
Like one night?
2 nights.
No, it's 2 nights, okay.
But
2 nights.
he's talking about the Constitution in a way that you have never heard it talked about.
And so you would really recommend this book?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, he's making it plain that when you have a document that's supposed to be of the importance that document is, framed to deal with the United States.
The diverse United States.
It wasn't designed to do that at all.
All the people, yes.
At the point that he's talking about, African Americans
and women
were 1/5 of a person.
Right.
1/5 of a person.
The women were not even considered.
Well, the South was trying to use us to gin up the census figures, but when he goes through it and brings you into a full understanding why it is that you have so many conservatives you know, latch on to things like the Second Amendment, my right to carry on. I can't quote it verbatim, but you know, they hang on these things until some black person says, well, okay. For example, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend had a permit, and when her house was invaded, he fired his pistol. Fortunately, he didn't get killed, but she was shot to death. I think like 15. They had the wrong house, wrong thing, the wrong everything, and a no-knock warrant. And he makes the point of saying that they tried for a minute to indict the brother and give him some time because he had a pistol and he was standing his ground. If it had been a white man and Breonna Taylor had been a white woman, they would have called him a folk hero. And he goes through things like that on and on and on. Every possible thing you can have that is supposed to be constitutionally grounded, he is explaining it is not. It is almost a matter of what it is that white people want to come up with and make valid because it suits their purposes.
So it's a really good point of view.
Oh, he's a monster.
Okay.
And not only did I enjoy the book, but let me give you a tiny example of it. I'm just going to give you a tiny example. He says, okay, cancel culture. Okay, constitutional protections, this is page 12, chapter 1. Constitutional protections of speech are mainly concerned with the government's attempts to silence or punish views the ruling party doesn't like. The Constitution cares about people limiting the inquiry of a free press through lawsuits or the threat of lawsuits. It cares about armed agents of the state threatening or jailing citizens who dare to protest the actions of that state. In short, the First Amendment cares about the things Republicans do when they control the government. Protest against the government is at the heart of why the First Amendment exists in the first place. Political speech against the government, speaking truth to power, is a speech that is given the most robust legal protection. But the people who make a living decrying cancel culture rarely lift a pen or hashtag when Republicans use the powers of the state to chill political protests. In fact, they do the opposite. Those who claim to care about cancel culture treat political protests as a thing that threatens the freedom of speech. They claim their freedoms are being threatened by the very thing the First Amendment is designed to protect. They call it the heckler's veto. Snowflake Republicans have spent much of the last decade trying to prevent people from protesting their speeches. Remember Desiree Furuz? She was the lady who was arrested and charged for laughing during Jeff Sessions' confirmation hearing for Attorney General back in 2017. She was charged with disrupting Congress and illegally protesting on Capitol grounds. Again, this was for laughing at a ridiculous statement made by Alabama Republican Senator Richard Shelby during the hearing. Shelby said that Jeff Sessions' extensive record of treating all Americans equally under the law is clear and well documented. You're laughing too.
Yes, not.
Sessions was one of the most well-documented racists available at the start of the Trump administration. He was literally on record as a Klan sympathizer and was deemed too racist to get a federal judgeship before the people of Alabama elected him senator. Furuz's laugh was a kind of response, relatively speaking, to Shelby's falsehood. Once confirmed, Sessions' Department of Justice hounded Furuz for a couple of months, trying to force her into a plea where she admitted guilt before eventually dropping the charges. Did the Cancel Culture Concern Club raise a ruckus over the Furuz prosecution? No. Andrew Sullivan wrote no screeds about the dangerous precedent of the Justice Department prosecuting somebody for laughing at Congress? Did these people write about Julie Briskman, a woman who was fired after she was caught flipping off the Donald Trump motorcade while she was out for a bike ride? No. David Brooks found no spare words to defend the right of American citizens to flip the president the bird. Name me your favorite cancel culture writer or thinker, and I will show you a person who remained mute in 2020 when Attorney General William Barr ordered the gassing of peaceful protesters outside the White House so President Trump could take a photo out with a Bible. Not one of these people who care so much when an editor gets pushed out of the New York Times for soliciting fascist columns was there when Peter Thiel came for Gawker. Gawker was an independent news website. It was a blog back when blogging was cool. Gawker reported the news with a heavy side of helping of snark. Back when this was still new and interesting. It was irreverent, it was exciting, it was occasionally wrong, and often trashy. And it was murdered by a wealthy white man. Thiel is a billionaire venture capitalist who co-founded PayPal and founded a hedge fund and did, I don't know, whatever it is one does to make $1 billion in a country that can't be bothered to address poverty and food insecurity.
Wow. Right.
Thiel happens to be gay. I know that because Gawker published a story outing him in 2007. You won't get any debate from me if you want to argue that outing people is not the best use of the freedom of the press that human civilization took around 4,000 years to codify and protect. But you also won't get any serious debate from anybody who has spent more than 5 minutes in a constitutional law class on whether reporting on the private sex lives of millionaires, billionaires, and public figures is squarely within the protection of the First Amendment. Anyway, he goes on and on. It's deep.
I see.
Hey, man, the brother Cole. Brother Cole. Brother Cole-blooded.
All right. And I Okay, because I just wanted to share with our YouTube and Facebook audience that while you write fiction, there's a lot of truth within your fiction.
I'm listening.
And you do a lot of research, and oftentimes that which you read on one hand is incorporated in what you write.
You damn right.
All right.
You're damn right. You got that right, baby.
I got that right, baby.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Bring it out.
All right.
Bring it out.
We're looking forward
Come on with it.
the third reading.
You coming up with
Come
that.
next Monday.
Coming.
All right.
Yes.
And until then.
Yes. See you, Alfred.
And Susan. And Andrea. Naturally. All right. Ciao.